Sneaker content creators. I get asked a lot. Who are the sneaker content creators that you listen to or that you watch? And I want to dive into them and give them their flowers, this time on Fire Footwear. Welcome back to Fire Footwear, everybody. As always, this is your host, Matt Frates, and I hope this finds you well, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this podcast. It means the world to me that people take out even a sliver of a minute of their day to listen to this show. And so to everybody who has been listening to it for a while, a big thank you. And if you're new, I just want to welcome you to the community and hope that you stay and hope that you enjoy this community. Here's the thing. Sneaker content is a very large group of people. And is a very large group of content. Sneakers in general is a niche that is pretty large. Now, I would consider it a niche because I think that sneakers themselves are sort of niche. I don't meet a lot of people who love sneakers, but I think that the sneaker community and sneaker culture is a very large group of people. And the thing about content creation in 2024 is that it's saturated. And it's not just saturated in sneakers, it's saturated everywhere. I've been doing content creation now for 4 years, and look, it's not easy. I think I wanted to do this episode because I get asked a lot from people and people who are followers of the show, actually. What other content creators do you listen to or watch? And honestly, a lot of people will watch and listen to the same people because, I don't know, they align with their views or whatever. The thing is, a lot of the people that I talk to about content creation, I'm very real about the journey. And I think it's important to be real. And so this episode is going to talk about content creation as a general concept because, yeah, it's sneaker related. Here's the thing. You're listening to this podcast and other podcasts because you love sneakers and you love the content that we're creating about this thing that we mutually love. I was on Sneak This podcast and we talked about that. And one of the things that Greg is very open about is how difficult content creation is. So I wanted to go through my journey a little bit because I think it's important. And then as we get along in this, I want to talk about some of the content creators that I listen to, that I appreciate, that I support. And it doesn't mean that there aren't other content creators out there that aren't worth mine or your support. The whole point of this episode is to highlight some folks and get you thinking about some different people and maybe even venture to one of these new folks. But content creation, let's talk about it. So in 2020, if you're talking about me, you're talking about the pandemic, you're talking about having a brand new baby at home, and a lot of things were different. A lot of things changed for me in a very, very short period of time. But one thing that had always been there was my want to do some type of creation of some type. When I was a kid or when I was in high school, I wanted to be a broadcaster. I wanted to do sports journalism. And look, my parents did the best that they could. My dad, I think, was on board with me doing some different things, but my mom, rest in peace, she wanted me to do something that she felt was going to be worthy of my skills, or at least the skills that she thought that I had. And so I went down a different path when I went to college, and not everybody gets the chance to go to college, so I was very fortunate to go, but the major that I chose, not really what I wanted to do. And over time, I finally learned that I needed to start doing these things for myself, but always back there, I wanted to do something. In 2018, I purchased a microphone off Amazon. I think it was like $17, and I wanted to start a podcast. I got books, I got everything. It just never happened. Something about it just never materialized. And I think it was because I wasn't slowing down enough in life. And so the pandemic kind of forces you to slow down. Having a baby forces you to slow down. And a lot of things sort of culminated into this moment where, okay, it's August of 2020. It's time. I'm going to take this plunge. And so I took that microphone. I took my 6-year-old laptop at the time, PC, went upstairs, clunked my way through an episode that was 17 minutes, lots of ums, lots of you knows, lots of dead air, just awful, really. And when I listen back to it, it makes me appreciate where I am today. But that was the first step. And that podcast was called So Fully Casual because I was trying to make a pun out of sneakers, something I liked, but I wasn't actually talking about sneakers all that much. And over the years, things have changed. And in 2021, I decided that I love sneakers. I was getting out of the rep game in terms of content creation there. I was making review videos. I started Sneaker Love, which is really the roots of this podcast. And I did it for a while. got rid of it because I wanted to consolidate into one podcast. I went through this phase where I thought that, you know what, I need to have a variety show because I'm stretching myself too thin trying to do all these different niche shows. And little did I know that was the worst thing I could possibly do, because if you make a show for everybody, you make a show for nobody. But over the time that I was away from Sneaker Love, I looked and saw that people were still subscribing. So I brought it back in, I think it was September of 2022. Now, the things that have changed since that first ever episode, you can't see it here. If you watch my videos on YouTube, you can't see it there, but there is a plethora of equipment that has been purchased, that has been obtained, and it's not easy to have high quality content. It just really isn't. The skills that you have to learn about how to put together good sound, how to edit good sound, everything that goes into making sure that everything is crisp, intelligible, everything in terms of video production, the camera that you use, the lenses that you have. Now, I'm very fortunate to use a lot of this equipment for many different things. And so financially speaking, it was an investment. And I think that's important for people to know, for people who are listening now who think, how does he make it so easy? And I've had people say that to me. It's like, it ain't that easy. There's a lot of time investment that goes into it. And over the years, the investment that I have made has gotten higher. It's ramped up. And to where we are now, sitting here in July of 2024, to where this is a well-oiled machine because of a lot of missteps, a lot of mistakes. And so on a weekly basis, I have to do the hardest thing, and that's come up with content, come up with ideas. And people sometimes think, well, how hard could it be? Sneakers provides a lot of things. Yeah, it's true. But if you listen to a lot of content, you'll find that a lot of people are talking about the same thing. And you know what? Sometimes I do too. When I talked about the undefeated fours, I know, of course, people are talking about that. But I try to give you something that's a different spin. And I think that's a great segue into the content creators that I follow and support, because I believe that as a content creator, what you should be doing is trying to provide value in a way that other people don't. And I do a lot of market research whenever I come out with new content. And so you'll notice that there's a theme to the content creators that I follow. And let's start off with a solo podcaster, and that is Sockjig. So full disclosure, if he's listening to this. Now, I did find out through a mutual friend of ours that Sockjig used to listen to the original iteration of this podcast. And when it went away and came back, I renamed it. He didn't realize that I'd come back. And so when I was on Sneak This podcast a couple months ago, he realized, well, I know that name, I know that voice. And so it's kind of neat to have a reconnection of content creators who do the same thing. But the reason that I respect this guy so much is because he does it by himself. And he does it in a way that I never could. And that's a full compliment, because he does it from such a different place and provides so much value to the culture. The behind the scenes stuff of how like things like Shopify work, and the way that he goes about trying to show what kind of odds that you have to win a raffle. And as a statistician in my real job, I love that stuff. And I love the insight. If you're listening to him, and you should be, if you're not, but you will learn something real, not just history, but you'll learn how to navigate the market today in 2024. And here's the thing, he's an old head at heart, man. I love that about him. And so to me, Sock is doing something that I only wish that I could do. And again, I'm trying to add value in a different way. I give you short form. I try to provide something, some piece of information that maybe you didn't know, maybe you forgot about. And I don't think a lot of old heads listen to my show. I assume it's a lot of people who maybe find themselves newer to the culture like I am, or not even newer to the culture, but maybe quiet observers, silent observers in the culture. And they just want to feel like somebody out there is like them. And that's kind of the way I feel like my show is. But Sock does a well-crafted show. It is impeccably produced. It's well thought out. And I appreciate that a lot about him. So I try to support him when I can. It's not always listening to every episode, but a lot of times it's interacting on Twitter, because he has a great Twitter handle, or great Twitter following. And just, he's doing it way better than I ever could. When you talk about investment, and when you talk about investing in video, I think that, to me, there are not a lot of video creators in the sneaker world that are doing a lot of great work. I believe that sneaker YouTube has turned into just who has access to more pairs. And you might make the argument that this group of people is in that same boat, but I don't think that it's true. So this is Wear Testers, and I've watched Wear Testers for a long time, but recently I went through my YouTube page and got rid of a lot of sneaker content. And that's because I felt like a lot of sneaker content had gotten stale, had gotten stagnant. But the thing about Chris is I feel like Chris from Wear Testers loves the game so much, and it comes from the most innocent place ever. I think also Chris and I are kindred spirits in the fact that I'm really nerdy at heart, and I know that he is too, with action figures and so many different things. But one of the things that I love about their videos is that I think that his excitement about sneakers is palpable because it is so genuine and is so real. And that's hard to fabricate. Actually, it's impossible to fabricate. I love that about him. The knowledge that you get comes from a place of not trying to establish a different niche on YouTube. Like, that's the way he talks to people in his real life. I know it. I feel it in my bones. I love that about him. And while not every video is one I watch, the ones that I do watch and support, I just love because of his delivery. Obviously, the production is great, but he's talked about how it's hard and how they're just getting to that point where this content is starting to like put food on their table, and they've been at it for a long time. So I really appreciate them highly, and especially Chris, because I think his knowledge is great and just the authenticity. You can't fabricate that. You can't fake it. It's amazing. We can't get out of here without talking about podcasts that are a bunch of guys talking about sneakers. And there's a lot of those, okay? There are a lot of those. And there's a lot of podcasts like that in general. I think a lot of people, when they make a podcast, are like, you know what? My friends and I, we talk about stuff. Let's make a podcast. How hard could it be? And they find out super quick that you and your bros or you and your friends talking about something that you care about is hard to make other people care about it. But there are two podcasts in particular that I want to highlight because I think that they do it in such a unique way, in a different way from each other. So the first one is the Sneaker History Podcast. Now, I discovered them because I think it was Mike was on Sneak Dis, I don't know, 2 months ago, like right before I was on there. And I loved his presentation. I loved when he talked about how much he wanted to learn about cinematography and his videos and Instagram and all that stuff. And I loved it. So I started listening to them, and I will admit that their show is very long and not every episode is for me because, you know, look, we have limited time. But one of the things that I love about them is the attention to detail that they pay to the history. I'm a huge believer that you need to understand where you've been or where the culture or whatever movement it is has been before you decide to insert yourself and say, you know, everything there is to know about this. It really rubs me the wrong way when you hear people talk about how something is whack when they don't even understand the place that it has in history. I don't have to have been in sneaker culture to understand that the Fruity Pebble LeBron 4 meant something. It just doesn't, it's not for me. But there's a lot of people who don't even know, right? So it sits and they're like, why would they come out with that? Well, that meant something to a lot of people back in the day. And Sneaker History does it in such a thorough way. It's not just the podcast. They've got the website. They've got the YouTube. They've got Instagram. There's so many ways in which they provide value to the sneaker community. So if you feel like there are gaps in your sneaker history or perspective on sneaker history, because one of the things that they do very well is they look at releases that are coming up. And let's take the AirTech Challenge 2. And they kind of give you their perspective on things historically because they've been in the game for a long time. I like that. And maybe the delivery of their content isn't always for me because, look, I mean, there's people who don't like my content, but I appreciate the detail that they put into it and the care that they have into it. And you can tell, right? You can tell that it's authentically them. I learn something every time I listen to them. And so I really appreciate that. But last and definitely not least is Sneak Dis Podcast. I mentioned them already in this episode, and it's not just because I was on their show. Now, I've discovered them late. I discovered Greg and George very late. And it's funny because I'd already created this pod before I even realized that they were as big as they were. And it wasn't until I started looking into other sneaker podcasts and started doing market research that way to say, okay, what do I have to do to be on par with people that are more established than I am? I started listening to them and I realized that their biggest asset is just how unabashedly honest they are. And it comes from, again, a place of this is who they are and this is how they feel. And Greg is very transparent about how they do their content. They're very transparent about how they don't hold anything back because that's how they talk about sneakers. And when they put their content together, they put it together in a way that's not thinking about, ooh, I wonder if Nike's going to pick us up. They're real. I mean, everybody should be real in making their content, but Sneak This does a great job of being real. And the thing that they do that I love the most is when they get into story mode about releases that they went to or ways that they have experienced sneakers that I just never did. And it's too late for me now to go back and experience that stuff. But when you can find somebody who will talk to you about those things and not tell you that the way that you do it is worse, but give you that perspective of this is what it was like when we were doing it. I love that. I think that it's great for people to have some kind of perspective about it's easy for us now. It's easy when I can pick up my phone and just click right there and say, yes, that is how easy it is to cop a sneaker today. And they do a great job of giving us some perspective. Now, they have grown so large that they have made it so that they can talk about a lot of different things. And when you grow a larger and larger audience, you have so much more leeway to kind of do what you want because you have put the work in, you've put the time in. And that's where I am now. I'm putting the work in, I'm grinding, and slowly and steadily this show grows. The listener base, the YouTube base grows, and I appreciate all of that. But the thing is I am just one cog in this wheel. And I think that it's important that you understand that sneaker content is vast. There are a lot of different voices out there, and you should be in search of as many of those voices as possible. And the reason that I say that is because you should be getting opinions from many different people and using that to form your own opinions. Sneakers is not a one-size-fits-all, I don't want to say genre, but a one-size-fits-all hobby for people. It's however you want to do it. If you want to be a reseller, be a reseller. If you want to wear reps, wear reps. If you want to be a collector, be a collector. You get what I mean? There's many ways in which that you can experience sneakers. And I think that seeking out different kinds of content, different voices, opinions, perspectives is important. And it doesn't just have to do with sneakers. You should be doing this in just about everything that you're doing in life because having a very large and diverse worldview helps you to have more logical, more common sense opinions. And I think that benefits the world greatly. So those are the content creators that I listen to. But before we get to the end, let's get to the release of the week. Release of the week, where I like to highlight a shoe that has caught my eye. It's not always hype. This week it's not. Just something that I want you to know about. So we're going to focus in on the Book One because I don't know how many more colorways are going to come out of the Book One. And so if you want one in your collection, you may just have to start copying the Book One whenever it comes out. But on July 18th, the Book One releases in the sun bleached colorway. To me, it's a purple colorway. And so it kind of goes with the Phoenix Suns aesthetic a little bit. I like the shoe. I don't think I could pull this off. But again, if you are somebody who wants a Book One in your collection, you're going to have to find a way to get one if you don't want to pay resale. And so this could be your opportunity to do so. What kind of content do you seek out when it comes to sneakers? And what are who are some of your favorite content creators? I would love to know. First thing, I have a new voicemail box. For those of you in the US, 202-643-9170 is the number. Of course, if you are out of the country, you're going to want to hit that 1 for the country code. Call, leave a message, leave a voicemail. Tell me what you like about the show, how you found the show. Give me a sneaker story. Point is, I want to hear from people who listen to this podcast. I want to hear from people in the sneaker community, and I want to be able to highlight it on this show. So if you call and leave a voicemail, very, very likely that I'm going to highlight it on a future episode. Find me on Instagram at Fire Footwear Pod is the handle. I would love to have you as a part of this group chat that we have. Just a bunch of people talking live, talking sneakers, and it's a really, really fun time. If you want to see some of the reels that I put out on TikTok at Fire Footwear Pod, if you want to see video content that I do that is different than the audio podcast, find Fire Footwear on YouTube. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And of course, if you're listening in audio, specifically if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave a rating, please leave a review. It means the world. It helps the show to be seen. And honestly, if you leave a review and let me know something that you like about the show, it lets me know that what I'm doing is working so that I can go and make changes if need be. And it's just nice to hear from people who have been listening for a long time who maybe feel like they don't have a voice or can't say something to me. So please leave a review. It means a lot. Again, I want to shout out the people who have done so because it means the world to me to see the things that have made you feel good about yourself. Hope this finds everybody well. I hope this finds everybody safe. And I will talk to everybody next time. This is Fire Footwear. The opinions and viewpoints expressed on Fire Footwear are those of Matt Frates and his guest, and not necessarily those of the Matty Ice Media Network. Fire Footwear is exclusively owned by Matt Frates and is brought to you by the Matty Ice Media Network.